Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing guest is a friend of Superman. It's Lois, but this time it's Lois Perry. It's the first time I've ever had a guest or met anybody called Lois. It's a great name. So, who is Lois? Well, Lois is a professional PR person. She's a commentator on lots of different shows, the BBC, and lots of others she'll talk about in a minute. But most importantly, she's a director of CAR26. And we'll get into that again in a minute. So what does CAR stand for? Well, it stands for Climate Analysis Reason. So first of all, welcome Lois to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're
So
welcome.
I'm sorry I'm a little bit late today. As I said to you before, I went out last night. So yeah, so hopefully I don't look too terrible.
Don't mention things like that because you'd have got away with that then. Nobody ever
Oh
would have
no, I would
known.
have done, wouldn't I? Yeah. Anyway, thank you for having me.
No problem. Me and you first met a couple of weeks ago. You were doing a documentary, which we're going to talk about at the end of the podcast. And we got together in Manchester City Centre talking about how the cost of living crisis, which has been compounded by the energy crisis, is hitting everyday folk, especially the most vulnerable, the homeless, the single mothers, people living in poverty. It's hitting them the hardest.
Yeah, people on a fixed income, it's not going to go up because the energy prices are going up. So, they have to go without. We talked extensively, didn't we, about the heat or eat choice. No one should have to make that choice. So, yeah, no, it was fascinating talking to you in Manchester and hearing about all the amazing work that you're doing with the homeless. It's fantastic.
No, great. So let's get into CAR26. So what is CAR26 for people who don't know?
Right, so CAR26 stands, it's CAR, it's Climate Analysis Reason, and we set it up around COP26, which was a Mickey take, basically, out of how ludicrous we thought the whole COP26 thing was. Basically, we're an organisation that is campaigning on behalf of ordinary people against what we consider to be the lunacy of net zero policies. Net zero meaning basically we believe it's preposterous that the whole concept of having net zero is to save the planet, which is highly contested, and it just means reducing the amount of CO2 that we put in the atmosphere. But if you reduce the amount of CO2 that you put in the atmosphere, it means that you're not actually doing anything, making anything, going anywhere, or actually having a life, full stop. So yeah, so we're basically campaigning against net zero policies, which we see as anti-human policies actually, and we want a referendum. And yeah, so we would be campaigning, for example, on things like the ban on petrol and diesel vehicles that's supposed to be coming in, and us all going electric. What that means is that most people won't be able to drive, and that's actually what the plan is, I believe, that to get people off the roads completely, apart from, like always, rich people who can afford, who will be able to afford these stupid electric cars that don't even work properly and aren't in any way green either. That's the mad thing. Net zero policies push up energy prices. We subsidise wind farms and solar, which don't actually add anything really to the grid. You can't store the energy properly. It's a complete and utter farce. It's all about rich people becoming even richer using subsidies. There's a new tax that's being put on recently, a new hydrogen tax. I mean, in the last few days, that's going to be added on top of the green levy to people's energy bills. But it's absolute madness to be doing this. It really is, and there's no point either. I mean, it's totally contested. There's so many scientists that have different opinions about man-made climate change and stuff, but you never see it debated. They're shut down, they're cancelled. Hopefully, I think the argument's opening up now. But anyway, that's what we do. That's CAR26. We're campaigning against the lunacy of net zero policies, basically.
Right, let me ask you a couple of quick questions so people can judge because I agree with everything you've said and I agree with CAR26. So let me ask you a couple of questions so people can find out if we're nutcases or not.
Okay.
So the first question is, do you believe in climate change?
I believe the climate changes. Do I believe that it's caused by you and me driving about, or cows in a field? burping. No, I don't. And I'm not alone in that. I mean, there was a thing called the Clinton Declaration. There was one about COVID, but there was also another one recently which had 1,200 scientists, and it was headed up by a Nobel Prize winning scientist that said that they don't believe that CO2 has any impact on climate change or global warming or whatever they're calling it this week.
Yeah, I mean, climate change has always happened. The Earth has always been changing, always has changed,
And always
and
will.
always will be changing. So climate change is real. What we're arguing is, has man contributed to that? And if he has contributed to it, how much of a contribution and how insignificant is that contribution?
Well, absolutely. I mean, in the medieval, there's two periods of time that actually the IPCC, which is a big organization that reports on climate change. It's the scientific. It's supposed to be independent, but it's not. It's not independent at all. It's a joke, really. But even they acknowledged that there was a Roman warming period and a medieval warming period in this country. Now, I don't see many history books, with medieval people driving Hummers about. So, come on, it's a way of taxing us. It's a way of taxing us and limiting our behaviours and keeping us controlled. Electric cars are not in any way greener, even if you believe in the whole CO2 stuff. They're not. It's just done. The electricity is mainly produced using gas anyway. That powers the cars. You need to use oil and gas and stuff to make the cars. They don't last as long. They're not greener at all. But what they do have is that basically you're driving around a giant iPad. So, and it can be remotely controlled. It can be remotely switched off. You could be, I mean, if they did another lockdown, for example, just disable your car. You can even, it can be sped up and can change direction. The car can start driving. This is nothing to do with climate change. It's all about taxing us, limiting us, and control. It really is.
Let's get into some of those issues you mentioned there. So let's talk about cars, the personal car. The personal car has been one of the best inventions for the poor working class of this country.
Absolutely.
It gave poor people freedom to get jobs outside of their neighborhoods, to go on holidays, to take their children out, to keep in contact with families, for them to be able to move away, but also keep in contact and visit their parents.
Freedom.
It gave people freedom. You weren't relying on the state, you weren't relying on public transport, you weren't relying on friends. You then became an independent person and had the freedom to travel this great country however you wanted to do it.
Absolutely. And 17-year-olds buying old bangers and stuff like that, a few £100 cars, and that's not going to happen, is it? If it's all electric, good luck finding a £500 car that's electric. It's just, it's been the greatest invention. It has completely changed people's lives. It gave, as you say, working class, poor people, it gave them the freedom that rich people have. It gave them choices. And when you take away people's cars now, which is what they're trying to do, you take away people's choices. I mean, even silly things I was thinking about, like buying something on Gumtree, going and picking it up, taking a piece of furniture that you bought to your mum's house, stuff like that. That's all gone. All of that is gone. And it will affect the elderly and the disabled and young mothers with small children, because it's a nightmare doing anything with small children unless you've got a car. It will affect them the most. So once again, the most vulnerable are going to be, shut out of society. Because that's what you do when you take away someone's car. You shut them out of society.
You have more control over them because then they're dependent on the state for their movement.
Completely.
The question I want to ask is, when did we have this discussion about cars? When did the country have a discussion, a referendum, or parties had different policies where we voted for our government and governments and councils to start penalising us for having cars? Where was that discussion in our democracy?
There was no discussion. The Climate Change Act, which was put through by Ed Miliband, I believe it was in 2013, but I could be wrong. I'd have to check that. But they didn't even debate it in Parliament properly. It was just waved through. It was just literally no challenge, just went through. Everyone just voted for it, every single party, no debate, no discussion. So of course, these targets have been put in, net zero by a certain time and everything, by all of the political parties. There's no discussion. It's just, this is what's happening. How can something so fundamental to our lives, like for example, cars, be just waved through with no discussion, no vote in Parliament, nothing? It's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. So many things have been done in the name of net zero at the moment, which is so fundamental to our way of life. It's unbelievable. And again, just wave through.
Let's have a look at some of the other points here. So let's have a look at wind turbines, which most people don't know are not recyclable, only last 20 years, and then they have to go to landfill. It's like, who created these things?
And they're made in China using electricity that is generated from burning coal.
And then the energy they produce, obviously if there's no wind, they produce nothing. And if there is wind and too much wind, the electricity is turned off because we cannot store it. So for people who don't understand, when you create electricity, you either use it there and then.
Yeah, you have to use it there.
You have to charge basically batteries, and the batteries then can be drained later on. But we don't have the technology to make batteries efficient or affordable at such a scale. We're not charging little Duracells. We need to charge these huge things that don't exist at the moment for us to be able to use. So therefore, wind farms are basically a pet project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They are a complete and utter scam. There's no other way no other way to talk about it. There really isn't. And I think it was yesterday or in the last few days. I can't pronounce his surname. Is it Lord Devon? No, something like that. He basically, it came out that he's advising the government on net zero policies and their legislation, and he's got financial interests in renewables and advises people to invest in renewables and other things based on the legislation that he's telling the government to put through. I mean, it's law at the moment that when energy that generated from wind farms is happening, it goes into the grid. It has to, and they switch off the brilliant, wonderful gas, and they actually put it into the grid, and it's about 8 times more expensive. So, so pushing energy prices up all the time, it's absolutely ludicrous. And what most people don't know is because they're so ineffectual, wind turbines, they're powered by gas anyway. When you see them, they're turning round slowly like that. That's gas getting them to do that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because otherwise, they would go rusty or whatever, or they would just, if the wind wasn't blowing. Yeah, when they're going around really slowly like that, that's gas. Madness, absolute madness. And the other scam is solar. That's a scam as well. And taking good farmland and using it, requisitioning it and using it for these, as I say, it's a subsidy thing.
Let's get into solar a bit. Let's get into solar because solar power has been around for a long time. The technology has improved dramatically. What are the issues with solar now?
Well, solar, again, you can't store it properly. We're not renowned for being that sunny in this country. Again, look, if you're living off grid and you've got solar panels, great. Yeah, that's fantastic. But in terms of using it to power an economy, no, that's not going to happen. And again, you've got the battery storage issue as well. One of the biggest battery storage units in Europe was actually opened quite recently in this country. And I need to get this right. I think it would power 2% of our energy requirements for an hour, even at full capacity. Yeah. But it's even worse than doing that because the subsidies are so massive for these things that even though it's almost pointless building this thing, yeah, it still will make loads of money for the people that have done it because when I say subsidies, I'm not talking about taxes. I'm talking about, well, there are taxes as well, but I'm talking about actually on your energy bill, extra on your energy bill every month. is money going to these people. And you know, I did an interview with Lee Anderson MP, who's now the new deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, which is you know, that's what happens when I interview people. Suddenly, you know, great things happen for them. But you know, he was saying about the civil service, they've got their fingers. Well, look, I'm not going to make any allegations, but you know, civil servants who suddenly retire and then they're on the boards of renewable companies and stuff, you know, things like that. I mean, we all know it goes on, but they've been blocking us fracking. They're the ones that blocked the fracking. Why? Why would you block fracking? Unless you had some interest in the renewables, which we now know for a fact is going on because it was in the Telegraph a couple of days ago with Lord Devon. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned money, one of the biggest things that woke me up this last year, I would say, was I thought the green agenda was purely a far left lunatic ideology. Let's all go back to living in caves. Let's hunt rabbits. Well, not rabbits because they're almost human. Let's eat nuts and wild berries. I thought it was all about that, which it is to a certain extent. But then this last year, I've also realised there's also a capitalist agenda to this as well, because we have companies who don't necessarily believe in any of this, because why should they? But if they can make money out of getting involved with green energy, making wind turbines, you know, selling their land for solar panels, making electric cars, getting government subsidies, making a fortune, high taxes, if they're making money on this, then part of me goes, well, who can blame them? Because that's their job as a business to make money. So we're really being attacked by both sides of the political spectrum. We've got the left lunatics and we've got the money makers, both all wanting this because they're both getting different things out of it.
No, I agree with you. Yes and no, because the thing is, it's not proper capitalism because green businesses only work with government subsidies. So it's not pure capitalism in its traditional sense. If you remove all of the government money, these industries just wouldn't exist
overnight.
because they would collapse. Yeah. So no, I do totally agree with you. But yeah, as I say, pure capitalism in its purest form, it would not. They wouldn't even bother. They really wouldn't. I mean, you know, who was I talking to the other day? Somebody said, I think it was on social media, there was an interview with a guy that does sell secondhand cars, and you can't get any more cold facing than someone who sells secondhand cars. He said, I don't bother with pure electric cars. They don't hold their value. We don't even bother trying to sell them. There is no market whatsoever for them. I mean, because the battery in an electric car will only last 10 years, and it's the same as a battery in your phone. Its effectiveness will decrease over time, like any battery would. So, you know, who wants a second-hand car with a battery that needs to be replaced? It's probably going to cost the same as the car again in some cases. You just wouldn't, would you?
There was a guy in Finland. I was going to say that there was a guy in Finland who made a video of him blowing up his electric car. He'd had it for 5 years. The battery had deteriorated. He'd need to buy a new battery, and a new battery was the price of a new car. So he filmed himself blowing up his electric car, saying, what's the point? Because if I buy a battery for it, I might as well just buy a new electric car. They're that expensive for them.
Well, actually, a lot of people don't even need to set fire to their cars because electric cars catch fire on their own. I mean, there's a ferry company that, again, I saw this the other day on social media, who've actually banned electric cars from their ferries because they catch light. They catch light on their own, and you can't put them out with water because of the way it's to do with the science of it. If you put water on it, it will actually increase the flames. You have to let them just burn themselves out. You can't have that happening on ships. I mean, it's just the whole thing is so mad, the whole net zero thing, that I feel like Alice through the looking glass sometimes. You know, when she says, am I mad or is everybody else mad? That's how I feel. You know, it's I'm a big Alice in Wonderland fan anyway, but yeah, but you know, curiouser and curiouser, madder and madder. You know, we're all mad here. It's yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to stay sane. I really am.
Have you seen a documentary called Planet of the Humans?
No, I haven't. I'd like, tell me about it.
You can watch it free on YouTube. Check it out. It's a proper, it's a high quality documentary by Michael Moore.
Yes, I do
He
know
did
Michael Moore. Yeah,
Fahrenheit 9/11 and
he did
Welcome to
Bowling for
Columbine.
Columbine as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So he doesn't star in this. He produces it, and it's all about green energy in America, and it's all about it's a huge con, and they look at every stage of different types of green energy, and show you fields. I mean, not fields. I mean, we know what a field is in the UK, but a field in America can be the size of Greater Manchester. That's a field in America.
yeah. It's a very big place.
Full of in California, full of solar panels, and they show you when it was opened and the president there opening it. This is amazing. This is the future. And then they visit it 7 years later. It's derelict. None of the panels work. They've all smashed up. The land has just been abandoned.
Well, and there's chemicals that seep into the land as well from the solar panels as they break down.
But the documentary basically says the people who started this piece of land earned enough money opening it, and there was no need to do anything else with it. So they all walked away.
The money they would have got from the government
was all up front, and so that was the end of it. They're going to electric cars, where there's a new electric car being launched, and they turn up at the launch of it, and it's 100% electric, and there's no carbon dioxide. It's completely green, and this investor goes, "How's it charged? Oh, it's charged by this point here. Oh, right. And where does electricity come from there? Oh, it's a national grid. Right, the national grid of the state, yes. Well, the national grid of the state is 95% coal or gas. So, and you can see this woman go, next question.
Next question. I know. And as I say, the amount of CO2, which apparently is such a terrible thing, but it isn't, that goes into the making of these cars is actually more in some cases than a petrol and diesel vehicle. Yeah, madness, absolute madness. And the pursuit of this agenda as well. I mean, you can actually get subsidies from the government to basically, in effect, close your business down because you can make more money from saving the CO2. I mean, it's
well, that sounds something straight out of the EU. The EU pay farmers not to farm.
I know.
We've got too much, we've got too much olive oil, we've got too much wheat. So let's pay farmers this year not to grow any wheat because we don't want any more wheat. It's like, these are basically socialist policies. This is how socialist countries run. And we wonder why they all end up starving and eating rats. It's because their policies make no sense and always lead to the crumbling of the economy and then society.
They don't make any sense whatsoever. And I completely agree with everything you've just said. But the net zero lunacy is not lunacy because as you say, it's an extreme left-wing ideology to break down capitalism. Because if you're not producing anything or doing anything or going anywhere, which all of these things are apparently bad for the planet, you're just literally just sitting there, aren't you? Just waiting to be given your universal basic income, staring at the screen. I'm quite proud of my fellow folk in Southend at the moment because they tried to the concepts, the 15-minute city thing and the zoning thing which they're bringing in Oxford, where you can only leave your area and drive into certain other areas 100 times a year. I mean, that is just straight out of a dystopian playbook, isn't it? But my people, they didn't even debate it in the council. They just went, no, brilliant. I think try and get a Southend bloke telling me can't drive from one road to the next. Good luck with that. But my council knew that it was just going to be a no-go, so didn't even bother debating it. But they're fighting it really, really hard in Colchester at the moment. So
and this is what we need to do. We need to fight this council by council, and eventually the government will pay attention and go, we need to change direction because we're not going to get voted in again if we go down this line. But we have to chip away street by street, council by council, region by region, and we need to start changing politicians' views because they're not representing the country.
No, they're not. It's really, really unpopular. We did some polling when we first started CAR26. Actually, my polling was put to Boris Johnson at the at COP, which was quite funny. So the polling that we did with YouGov showed that 58% of those that expressed an opinion either way wanted a referendum on net zero policies. That was back, that was what, 15 months ago. And so even with all the barrage of propaganda and everything, but we did it again a few months ago, and it had gone up to 62% of those that expressed an opinion. So it is not a popular policy, but as I say, we didn't get a chance to vote on it. We did. There isn't a party that opposes it. The only one that does oppose it actually is the Reform Party, led by Richard Tice. Yeah.
The chance of us getting a referendum on net zero or anything in the future is absolutely zero.
It's net zero chance.
Yeah, it's net zero because they will never ever trust the British public to have such a say ever again.
No, they won't, because we did the wrong result last time as far as the establishment was concerned, didn't we? Those pesky members of the public giving the wrong result to the civil servants. The civil servants have made no attempt whatsoever to change anything. They're just hoping, they're sitting tight, hoping that we go back into the EU. All the rules and regulations. They said there's going to be a bonfire of rules and regulations. I mean, Rishi Sunak's been making noises in the last couple of days. Going to start doing. I don't believe a word.
I don't believe a word.
I really don't. No, he's a globalist. Why would he want that?
Well, at the moment, what's the point? Because he's going to be out of office in 18 months. So there's no incentive for him to do it. All the Tories have ever done in the last 13 years is overpromise. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and they just repeat the same promises every 18 months. And like idiots, the vast majority of the public go, oh, that sounds good. But it sounded good 18 months ago, and it sounded good 18 months before that. Of course it sounds good. Just do something, but none of them have got any intention, any courage to do anything. The politicians we have now are caretakers. They're not leaders. They're not statespeople. And I said this the other day, and someone said, they're not caretakers, Nick. They're undertakers.
Yeah, I know. Well, it shouldn't be funny, but yeah, they are undertakers. You've got people who are literally freezing to death in their homes. I mean, an old lady I've read about recently in her late 80s, she died of hypothermia. How can you have people dying of hypothermia in this country when we've got loads of coal, we've got loads of gas, if we were fracking for the gas? The whole thing is absolute insanity. And instead, we're pushing up energy bills to pay for wind turbine subsidies and solar subsidies. It's a scam. It really is.
We're so afraid of global warming that we allow 80-year-old women to freeze to death in their homes.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, they've changed it now because I know. Well, there hasn't actually been any warming for nearly 10 years, so they've had to change it to climate change now. But there's no more extreme weather events than there's ever been. And in fact, the amount of deaths from extreme weather events has gone down by 99% over the last 100 years. Because if you have a flourishing economy based on oil and gas, fossil fuels, you can actually, what's the word? You can build things to cope with extreme weather events. But as I say, there's no more extreme weather than there's ever been. There really isn't. Was it Prince Harry who said that volcanoes going off was due to man-made climate change? I mean, the things people believe are absolute insanity. Oh, it's hot, it's climate change. It's really cold. Oh, that's climate change. Yeah. What? Come on, we're supposed to be sensible people. They've brainwashed all the kids. That's the problem. Showing them pictures of polar bears and all of that. Do you know there's so many polar bears now? The polar bear population in the world has gone up massively over the last 20, 30 years. There's so many of them. It's unbelievable. It's all a big lie. It is.
So how did you get involved in all this?
Well, I have been political my whole life. I was involved with the Labour Party for a long time. I was When I was 15, I was knocking on doors for Tony Blair, and I was thought it was amazing that you can have this caring capitalism, and I
You really were part of the problem all those years ago. You're one of the reasons why we're here now.
sorry, I was 15 though. You can forgive me. But anyway, I became extremely disillusioned with politics. I mean, extremely. And what woke me up again was the all the lockdown stuff. I suddenly found myself agreeing with almost everything that the Backbench 1922 committee was saying, which was a bit alarming for me with my background. I thought I'm agreeing with everything they're saying, and I thought that the whole premise of the lockdown and the power of the state, what they were able to do, you can't leave the house and stuff. It blew my mind, and I thought, okay, forget Labour, forget Tories. I'm a libertarian. First and foremost, I'm a libertarian, and I redefined myself as what was important to me was that. And then I got involved with the Reclaim Party, which was led by Lawrence Fox, still is, and I was involved with them for a time. I'm still friendly with Lawrence and Martin Daubney, but I'm not involved. I haven't been involved with the party for some time. I became their women's spokesperson and also their representative for the southeast. And anyway, there was some interesting stuff that happened, and I made a decision to part company with the Reclaim Party. And but as I say, everything's fine, and I'm friends with both of them. But it woke me up politically. It woke me up, and one of the issues that I looked at was how net zero was being weaponized as another control mechanism, much the same as lockdown policies. I mean, we've even had discussions about climate lockdowns, things like that. I mean, it's just another thing that can be used to control people. And anyway, so I was asked by a small group of Brexit supporting businessmen whether I would be interested in putting together this organisation and confronting this issue head on, which not a lot of people wanted to do. I mean, you used to get called a climate denier, which is disgusting using that word in this context. So yeah, I mean, they thought this ballsy Essex girl would be the right person to go to battle, and and I said yes, obviously, and read about 20 books, in a very short space of time by some fantastic scientists and writers about just basically informing myself about what a load of nonsense it all is, and and went from there. We launched around COP26. I went to COP26. I actually got thrown out of COP26, which was brilliant. And I got thrown out live on Talk TV. I was being interviewed. They realised I was in the press area and I was about to go live on Mike Graham's show on Talk TV, and I had my little light and my phone all set up. And then someone clocked who I was, and I saw them at the corner of my eye coming towards me with the security, and I was about to go live, literally. And I ran into the disabled toilet, and I did the broadcast with them banging on the door. You can see it on YouTube. It's really good.
I'm going to go check that out.
This Mike Graham saying to me, so is anyone wanting to have an open and honest debate with you about net zero policies? I said, don't be silly, Mike. I said, they're banging on the door. They don't believe in free speech. It's just a massive gravy train, the whole thing. It was madness. And I don't think that anyone there really believed in any of it, actually, but they did believe in the pounds and the pence that were coming into their bank accounts from our money, from government subsidies. So yeah, no, that was fun. And yes, I've been building up the profile of CAR26 and what we're doing. I've been confronting issues head on. And it's been good. I do a lot of stuff on GB News, which I really, really enjoy. I'm very grateful to them for supporting me and having me on so much. I love doing that. So it's good.
So you'd say it's been a journey.
Yes, to use that American term, yes, it's certainly been a journey. And when I look at some of my early TV stuff, we're like cringing, but
We all do that.
I know. I mean, I've been doing TV for about 5 years now. I've been doing radio for a lot longer. I was a regular panelist, and hope to be again on Channel 5, Jeremy Vine show. So I got a bit too unwoke for them. But they do occasionally have the pantomime villain on. So maybe they'll have me
That
back
might
at
get you
some
back.
point. I hope so.
So when I said you've been on a journey, that's a good segue into my next question, which is you've been traveling around the country, speaking to local people, speaking to scientists, speaking to other people about this issue, about CAR26, about the cost of energy and what we're doing with the net zero agenda. What have been those discussions? What have you found out? Who have you spoken to? And what's been the learning for you from that?
Yeah. Well, I did we did we did sorry, can you edit that bit out? Right. Okay, right, let's do it again. So my organisation, we made a decision to do a series of interviews and under the umbrella term Lois Goes North. And and the whole thing was it was to do with fracking, but it was also to do with the cost of living, energy prices, the energy crisis. And I talked to Francis Egan, who's the CEO of Codrilla, the fracking company that had the licenses and was shut down. Well, they kept saying he could frack, then he couldn't frack, then he could. It was ridiculous. And obviously all the people that would have benefited from that, the local people and everything in Liverpool, for example, Blackpool. We talked to Lee Anderson, MP. That was good. That was very, very fun, actually. I really enjoyed that. I spoke to your good self. I spoke to scientists. I spoke to a geologist that is very pro net zero, but is also pro fracking. And the reason why he's pro fracking is because he's pro net zero. Because if you're bringing energy in from America, they're fracked in gas on ships powered by diesel and bring it over here. You are producing more CO2. It's actually, if you believe in the whole CO2 stuff, the best thing is for us to frack. I spoke to ordinary people. I went to a community kitchen in Blackpool, and I spoke to people at a football game about all people from all different walks of life.
What were the normal people saying to you, the average Joe on the street? What were their concerns? What were their opinions? We should be listening to average people's opinions. What were they saying to you?
Well, everyone always thinks the government is out of touch, don't they? But they really feel that now. I mean, when you've got a government that's pushing ahead with things that are going to completely and utterly destroy your life, already are destroying your life. Like, for example, I was talking to one woman who have grown-up kids who have good jobs come to her house to use her washing machine because it's so expensive using the electricity where they're living. They've got a good job, but they can't afford to wash their own clothes. That shouldn't be happening. I spoke to people who are literally making the choice between heating and eating. I spoke to a taxi driver who works 6 days a week, but his energy costs have gone up so much that twice a week he goes to the soup kitchen, the community kitchen, to have a free meal. I spoke to a lady who turns her fridge off to save electric. One woman that I didn't meet, but I was told about by one of the outreach workers at the community kitchen, had made a decision 2 weeks ago. Well, it would be more than that now, 4 weeks ago. Her electric was about to run out. She's got a baby. She went and worked as a street prostitute to put some electric on the key meter. I mean, these are real people. And the irony is, if fracking had been allowed to go ahead where she in Blackpool, she would have either very cheap or free energy. So, decisions are being made for no reason whatsoever, no valid reason anyway, that are completely and utterly destroying people's lives. And I'm talking about working people. I'm talking everybody. Yeah. Even I spoke to this one woman. Her and her husband have good jobs. They've got 2 cars. She she said because the amount of driving her husband does with his job, he's always driving all over the place. There's no way he could have an electric car. It just wouldn't work because the amount of charge, it just wouldn't work. So, but she said they both got really good jobs. She's a teacher, and so I'm guessing combined income maybe with him. I'm guessing probably about 60 or 70 grand, right? So, and they can't afford to take their kids to the cinema on a Saturday anymore. Now, I mean, I know that sounds like a first world problem, but it's a big deal to them. You know what? You built up your family. You've got little treats and things that you do because of the price of energy and the price of fuel. She can't take her kids to the cinema on a Saturday, and that's obviously a very different problem to someone who's having to switch their fridge off. But I'm just using that to illustrate the point that it affects everybody. I mean, it affects business people as well. I mean, and then the prices go up. So when you've got people whose energy costs have doubled, like Lance Foreman, who owns Foreman Smoked Salmon, he's done loads of interviews recently saying that his energy costs went up from 200,000 to 400,000 a year. I mean, that's just electricity. That goes on. That's going to be across the board. So that pushes the price of everything up. If you go into the supermarket and you can see that Lurpak is £7 or something, right? There's a reason for that. It's energy costs, and it's completely and utterly unnecessary. Completely. So yeah, people didn't really care about net zero. They just want the government to care about them. They don't understand why this ideology is being pushed at their expense. It doesn't make any sense to them. It really doesn't. People were very angry, actually. And Francis Egan, I mean, he was perturbed and annoyed. I mean, that's putting it mildly, at the hokey cokey of government, the government saying the moratorium on fracking had been lifted and then it was put back in place when Rishi got in 2 days later. Him having campaigned for the leadership of the Tory Party saying that he would frack.
Yep. You can't believe a word that any Tory says anymore now. I said to you when we had the dive interview a couple of weeks ago, I can't wait for the Tories to get decimated at next general election. Not because I want Labour, because Labour will be worse, but Labour Labour will destroy the country a lot quicker. So we hit rock bottom, and then we can
rebuild.
When we can rebuild, that's what's going to happen, just like the late 70s. But all the Tories are doing are killing us slowly. I'd rather have a quick death from Labour.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because I've spoken to a lot of lifelong Conservative voters, donors, a big donor actually, who said the same thing. Been a Conservative all his life and donated over £250,000 over the years to them, and he wants them to crash and burn. Because that's the only way that we'll get a real Conservative Party. I can't believe I'm saying this stuff. My God, I hope my granddad is not sitting in heaven listening to this. Sorry, Nan, Dad. Oh, jeez. I've got his photo looking at me while I'm saying this stuff. But he was a libertarian and he was a capitalist. He had his own business. He employed over 100 staff at one point. So he hated the unions. So he was an interesting Labour supporter. You wouldn't consider him. Yeah, and he was completely unpolitically correct and massively chauvinist, apart from when it was anything to do with me. Anything to do with me didn't count. I could do anything, but yeah. So unfortunately, I'm as much of a chauvinist as he is now, or was. I'm terrible.
Let's end on a high. So, what is the one short-term aim that you think you're going to be able to achieve? So I know you want a referendum on net zero. We're never getting a referendum ever again in this country.
We want a debate, really. We want a debate. And
so that's what you're aiming for, a debate, a national debate.
A national debate. We want the science to be able to be looked at and both sides of the argument to be presented and for people to make their minds up. We want the government to realise that their net zero policies are extremely unpopular. And that's my one woman mission, to make sure that people are informed of what net zero and all the policies that are done in its name really means. It means net zero life. It means you don't have a life, basically. It means that you're inside staring at the screen on your UBI, not going anywhere, not doing anything, not seeing anybody, because that produces CO2. You know, they're even trying to stop farming because that apparently is bad for. How can farming be bad for the planet? I mean, come on. So we want the 2030 ban on petrol and diesel vehicles to be reversed, because it's just completely impractical. For for example, a van, an electric van can only take an eighth of the load of its equivalent petrol and diesel. It's just completely and utterly impractical. We want that reversed. We want the green levy to be optional on your energy bills. We want to be fracking. We want clean coal. We want a vibrant, prosperous economy, not just for the very rich people, but for absolutely everybody. And ultimately, we're a libertarian organisation, and anything that infringes on people's lives and prevents them from being free, we're against.
That is the best sentence of the podcast. So let's end there, because I completely agree with that last bit there. That's what I want to be, a free man living in a free country, and everybody else in this country wants the same as well. But our government seems to forget sometimes we were born free in a free country. Their job is to keep it that way, not to start changing it. Lois, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And this podcast,
and I hope I don't get too puffy from all the champagne last night.
Well, we can just blame it on a poor connection on the Wi-Fi. That's why. That's why we don't look our best.
I keep fishing for a compliment here because you keep not taking the bait.
But your interview with me and this podcast will be released same time on the same day. So if you want to look at our interview that you did, go into the description of this video. There'll be a link there. Click it. It'll take you to our video, which was a much better production.
No, this is great. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.